So I've been a K-pop fan for over 10 years now, probably 12 or 11 years. I've seen a lot of things as the years have unfolded. So when I became a K-pop fan, we were still, second gen groups were still pretty popular, but we were about to really get into the third gen. There was a lot of activities happening, different groups, scandals, not super undifferent from how K-pop is now, but the biggest difference that I've just noticed throughout the years has been the globalization of K-pop and how it has reached new levels that I honestly never thought would ever happen in this industry. For the longest time, I thought, K-pop is going to remain a largely Korean industry, which makes sense. I mean, Korean pop, and throughout the years there have been foreign idols, so idols predominantly from Japan or China, Thailand. Pan-Asian idols are not a novelty. This has been happening for a really long time. And also idols who are maybe Korean of original descent but grew up in places like the States or Canada or Australia. That's been a staple in K-pop for many, many, many years. That's not a new thing. What is a new thing, as of lately at least, is the advent of the American injection into K-pop. And what I mean by that are shows like A2K and Dream Academy that I'm calling the reverse globalization of K-pop. Now, what do I mean by reverse globalization? Well, think about when K-pop was really first becoming popular in the West. Psy with Gangnam Style, BTS, Blackpink, So you think about these acts as making media and content and songs, honestly, to penetrate into the Western market. But you don't really think about Westerners trying to penetrate into the K-pop market. The one instance that I can recall off the top of my head that is infamous in the K-pop community is EXP Edition, which was this failed project of Westerners trying to break into K-pop. It was just a total mess. It didn't work, and honestly, it became such a meme after it flopped that it really made me believe that this would never work in Korea. We would never see foreigners and, basically having no connection to Korea make it in Korea. But, egg splat on my face apparently, because with the creation of A2K and Dream Academy, it's clear the message coming from the top companies such as JYP and HYBE that K-pop is evolving. We're not at that point anymore where this has to be an exclusively Korean or Pan-Asian event. K-pop can now be anybody. Anybody can be a part of K-pop, including Americans, Europeans, Africans. Anybody can participate in K-pop and promote in Korea. And this is really exciting, but also a little bit interesting. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Now, I want to sort of amass all of the examples of groups outside of Korea trying to penetrate into the Korean market and sort of canvas their successes and failures. So EXP Edition, as I mentioned before, is a really famous example, infamous example of a total, flop failure trying to penetrate into the K-pop market. But more recently, we had the case of XG, which is an entirely Japanese group, entirely based in Japan, like their company is, they're not part of any K-pop labels, and them actually making a really good impact into not only K-pop, but the international market, and using K-pop promotional shows, like Music Bank, M Countdown, what have you, to promote their music and get an international fan base. To be honest, when XG first came out, I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, so they're a Japanese group, but they're promoting in Korea, but all their songs are in English. I was like, what are you? I'm a proud alpha now. I'm a fan of theirs. I think they're awesome. And they definitely proved me wrong, and I think they proved a lot of people wrong. And XG is just such a success story that's come from this, new movement. Now, with the recent debut of Vicha, JYP's new group, we're starting to see how this idea can really flesh out when you get the backing of an established label such as JYP. Now, Vicha, from what I gathered, has had some pretty positive reception online, and I'm just pulling up their sales here. Okay, so I can't really find sales of Vicha anywhere. I mean, they technically haven't debuted yet. They've only done their pre-releases. But when they debut and we get those sales numbers in, I think that's going to really tell us how viable this strategy is of, debuting non-Koreans in K-pop. And from what I could gather from a lot of comments on their YouTube channel, primarily the Korean comments, which are the ones I was most curious about, they seem to be really well received. And they seem to be doing okay for themselves in the public eye, despite only one person in Vicha being Korean and her being a Korean American for that fact. So, this is really fascinating to me, and it sort of begs the question, was this an inevitability, and is this the future of K-pop now? Now, Dream Academy is another show that HYBE is organizing, and I say the word show loosely because it's not really a show, it's a couple of YouTube clips and a fan voting. And I think Dream Academy is a real look into HYBE's culture, quite honestly, as a company, which is cold, corporate, and purely money-driven. I think that this show is really revealing HYBE as a company, and that's a totally separate topic. But interestingly, I think this is like the most diverse group of people they could have pulled for a show like this, because we have people from absolutely everywhere, whereas A2K was exclusively American. I think one of the girls who actually debuted was Canadian, so whatever, North American. But Dream Academy is from all over, and I find that really interesting, to say the least. To tie this all back together and to sort of get to what my point is, I want to explore, why is this happening now? Why now? Why 2023? Why are we seeing this new breakthrough in K-pop all of a sudden, when there have been ideas to actually do this for a couple of years now? And as I said before with the previous examples, this isn't necessarily a new idea. I mean, at some point, the idea of NCT Hollywood was going to be a thing, though, SM's not the best at keeping their promises, so I'm honestly not surprised that never happened. But why now? Why are we just now experiencing this? Well, my theory is that we have answered unequivocally, without any doubt, 100%, the question of, is K-pop a fad in the West? And I think at this point we know for a fact now that it is not. It is a mainstay, and it is going to be around for a very long time. I don't think forever, but I think the hype around K-pop is not dying down anytime soon. Not just in the West, but honestly everywhere in the world. It has really captured the world by storm, and now is the best time to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak. K-pop companies like JYP and HYBE know this, and they know that they don't have to necessarily just think about Korea anymore with creating their groups. They can think about the whole world, because the whole world is listening to K-pop. And because the whole world is listening to K-pop, it means that they don't necessarily have to make uniquely Korean groups anymore. And they don't have to focus just purely on promoting in Korea. Though, going back to XG as a previous example, I think that promoting in Korea is extremely effective, because a lot of fans watch those shows and the performances from those shows, myself included. So I think it's a great strategy. But at the end of the day, it isn't the only strategy. And now that we're seeing with Vicha, it shows that Koreans can actually be receptive to total Westerners who don't speak a word of Korean entering the marketplace, at least in sentiments. We're going to see what the numbers say, though, because the numbers don't lie. So that's going to be really curious to analyze and dissect. But more curious is the question of, does this mark a new phase in K-pop? Is this now the new thing in K-pop, to make non-Korean groups, to debut total non-Koreans who don't speak any Korean, and just play on the total international stage? I don't have an answer to that question, but I do imagine that, and as is the tone for oftentimes a lot of K-pop groups, the tone from the top always determines what everybody else is going to do. The winners, the more successful companies, pave the way for future decisions from smaller companies, and then everybody sort of ends up doing the same thing at some point. I mean, just look at groups like New Jeans, who totally mixed up the promotional formula for K-pop groups with having multiple promotional singles, not having a typical promotional schedule, not having fixed positions. You know, they're not the first group that did that last thing, but a lot of things that New Jeans popularized, especially the whole like Y2K revivalist thing happening in K-pop, totally ties back to them because they are extremely successful. And when something is extremely successful, you try to replicate it. So yeah, maybe we are going to see a lot more A2Ks and Dream Academies and all that stuff coming around. And personally, I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. But, and here's something I want to mention specifically about Dream Academy, I would much rather have a more humanist approach taken to the debut of these international girls, such as was the case in A2K, because I found JYP just did an amazing job. He really knows how to host a survival show for girl groups. I think 16 was great, and Nizu Project was awesome as well. So I definitely think he knows what he's doing with that. But my only hope is that if we're gonna keep doing this, and if we're gonna keep doing it in the format of these like survival shows, that we have a much more sympathetic approach rather than the really cold feeling of Dream Academy. I really don't like it, and I might make a separate video on that, but I really, really don't like how they're formatting Dream Academy. It's really taking the love out of all this. I mean, it's K-pop. It is corporate in nature, but like, can we at least try to pretend like it's not, you know? Okay, anyways, to throw in one last interesting caveat here, we've only really seen this happen with girl groups. I'm curious to see if this is going to become a boy group thing as well, if we're going to see more international boy group programs. And I'm not surprised that it's girl groups that they're starting with, these big companies, because I don't know exactly where I found this fact or statistic, but I do believe it to be true. Somewhere online I read something that said that like girl groups are statistically more popular than boy groups across the like sort of like the whole spectrum. And obviously, like, you know, BTS is the most popular group out of any K-pop group, and they're a boy group. So and you know, there's also really big popular groups like EXO, 17, you know, what have you. But I think generally speaking, girl groups tend to do a little bit better from like the smallest to the biggest. Like there's less deviation between them. So it makes sense why they're going for a girl group approach first. I think it's more economically viable based on performances of other groups. But at the same time, I am really curious to see if there is going to be a boy group iteration. They might just also see how the groups like Vicha and the Dream Academy group, when they debut, how they perform, and see how they measure up if they're actually pulling in enough money to justify a boy group version of this. But I think this is going to be a thing. I think that a lot of K-pop companies are going to be doing this going forward, and I'm really curious to see what this leads to, if this means that now K-pop is no longer going to really be K-pop anymore, and it's just going to be something entirely different. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. Okay, so we covered a lot of ground, but also not really. But thanks for watching. This is my second video. I really don't know what I'm doing, but I really wanted to talk about this topic. In hindsight, I didn't have that much to say, but I felt like nobody was really talking about this at a larger scale. So just throwing in my 2 cents here. If you like this video, I don't know, give it a thumbs up. I don't know, the YouTuber spiel, subscribe to my channel. And expect a video from me later this year or early next year, doing a little K-pop roundup like I did earlier this year. Because I'm definitely going to do that. There's been some interesting releases this year that I definitely want to talk about. All right. Peace out.